Hi YouTube and Blade Forums, John here again. Today I'm here with the Sage number 3 with the bolt lock here. This is an s30v. I did my standard sharpening routine, free-handed on the 600 grit, the red DMT diamond stone. And that's at 20 degrees approximately. Then to the Spyderco Sharp Maker at 20 degrees also. And then a total of 3 passes on each side on a loaded strop just to get any remnants of the burr removed. I got a few questions on Blade Forums, how I sharpen the knives, so that's it. And I get to the point where I can cut a paper towel cleanly. I mentioned this in previous videos. I take about 1/4 of a sheet of paper towel here, and my idea is that it cuts through here clean. So as you can see how it's cutting through, it's not catching, it's going right through. So that's the point in which I stop sharpening my knife. Right when I can get through that paper towel pretty cleanly like that, without it snagging, is when I consider it to be sharp. That's my test. Okay, so it's pretty consistent, because I'll be sharpening and I'll go through it and it snags, and I'll keep going, and it snags a little bit but not much, then I get it a little further and then it goes through clean, and that's when I stop. So I think I can get a pretty consistent edge that way. As consistent as you can get freehand. So with my Sage 3, this is my favorite for ergonomics, but I've never tried cutting rope on a cutting board before. So here we go with the cut test, cutting through sisal rope, 3/8 of an inch, 9.5 millimeters, until it will no longer reliably slice printer paper. So you can always hear the sharpness when it goes through the paper here, so take a listen. So it's pretty darn clean. So you can hear that. Cuts through no problem. So we'll begin the test now. Oh wow. This goes through easy. Oh my gosh. Wow. This is phenomenal. I was saying before, this is my best cutter. But after cutting rope with all these different knives, they all took quite a bit of energy to get through even at the beginning. This thing is just, look at that. It's just sliding right through these. It's like nothing is there. I don't know how long it's going to retain that for, but that is awesome. That puts a smile on my face, it really does. That is cool. The Sage 3 is unique compared to the other Sage models. The blade is actually approximately a 1/10 of an inch longer than the other Sages. And the blade is also, from bottom to top here, it's actually about maybe an 1/8 of an inch to maybe 3/16 of an inch taller. So it's really probably the best slicer of the bunch. Considering it's still made of the same thickness of blade stock, which I think is 0.125 inches, so 1/8 of an inch. This is just incredible, and the ergonomics on this are amazing, at least so far. We'll see how it does as I get further into the test. I want to try to keep these slices small because this could go far. We'll see how it does. Right now, I'm most curious about how this will compare to the s30v. But as we learned with the delicate test compared to the ZT, the blade geometry really does play a pretty big role in how far it will cut and how long. But this is just, this is just cutting through so easily. It's so nice. So the amount of pressure to get through this has barely changed at all from the first cut. Maybe a hair, but Crucible claims that the s30v has a finer grain, and if you're someone who's cutting through fibrous materials regularly, the s30 may be more beneficial to you, because if it has that coarser grain, then that's going to have that better sawing action. It's going to really dig into whatever material you're cutting, as opposed to sliding over it like a razor. This is still cutting very easy. My arm's a little tired from doing that silly razor blade cut. That just thing kept going and going and going. That thing was never going to stop. So it's not fair to compare that in any way to these pocket knives, because these are knives that you can actually use kind of hard. You can't even cut an apple with a razor knife. I mean, I'm sure you could, but you're not going to be able to slice it in half. But yeah, this is cutting through beautifully. You know, I really like this knife. I've always liked it, but I'm someone who carries the knife more than I use it. I maybe use my knife a couple times a day at the most, probably on average, you know, a half of a dozen times per week. And so I consider that everyday carry. To me, with that kind of knife, how it carries in the pocket is one of the most important aspects. And then with everyday carry knives, I classify another type of knife as an everyday user. So someone who actually uses their knife frequently throughout the day, where it's more important how the blade performs than it is, and how tough it is, than how it carries in the pocket. And to me, an everyday user knife, the epitome of that is the Spyderco Paramilitary 2. To me, the epitome of a everyday carry knife is the Benchmade 940-1. This thing here, the reason I never carried it much is because it took up so much pocket space. It's so wide, even when the blade is closed. It's hard to get your hand in your pocket when this blade is in there, you know. And so I don't consider it very feasible carrying it in your front pocket. So when I do carry this for EDC, I would keep it in my back pocket. The wire clip is nice. It has a good amount of tension. It's never even come close to slipping out of my pocket before. Let's do a progress report on the paper cutting just to see where we're at. Let me get a different angle there. Yeah, clean. I can push through there almost. I can, but pretty easily. Yeah, the Spyderco is very ergonomic so far. No hot spots. And that's something I was mentioning in the previous videos, just how comfortable I thought this blade was when it's opened. But you know, when it's closed, I don't like it so much, because you see how thick it is. Here's a Pioneer to compare it with. I mean, look at that. I mean, that's a huge difference. So, and you can't really grip it very easily too. But it's the same, for the reason that it's so wide, it also makes it such a good cutter though, you know. It's a unique Sage, different from all the other ones. And the bolt action lock is pretty cool because it functions like an access lock. The mechanics of it are different, but as far as engaging and disengaging it, it functions like an access lock. The only real difference is it uses a coil spring instead of the Omega springs, which to me seems to be more reliable. I've had this knife for maybe a year and a half, close to 2 years maybe, and I haven't had anything break on here yet. Like I said, my Benchmade 940-1 had the Omega springs break twice. But when they did break, it was only one Omega spring, it was never both, so the lock would still hold the knife open. However, it didn't have any more retention, so when you had the knife closed, it would pop open more easily. So you could be walking around in your pocket and the knife could open on you because it just didn't have the springiness to keep the blade closed. So I don't know if you can hear, but this thing is still cutting almost as good as it did in the very beginning. Yeah, as long as you don't have problems with S30 chipping, microchipping, as that rumor's been around forever, that S30v microchips. I've never seen it, but I suppose as long as you don't have problems with that and you're able to sharpen it without difficulty, it could be a better steel to have than S30v. I used to think the opposite until I started this cutting test just a couple days ago. Now I'm really appreciating the way it cuts through the fibrous rope here. And I'll tell you what, this thing takes a very fine edge. I used to have the native 5 with the G10 scales. I gave that to a friend as a gift. But that knife had also very good ergonomics. And that one got really sharp too. I never did any cutting tests. I just carried it like a normal human being would. Someone who doesn't frequent forums about knives. I'll try to pick up the cutting if I can maintain the speed, because it'd be nice if I can keep these videos under 22 minutes. It's annoying to have to go to like 30 minutes. It takes so long to watch it just to get the results. I think it's the blade is starting to show some signs of degrading now. Let's cut a piece of paper and see where it's at. It still cuts pretty well. I wouldn't say there's any... There was no hang-ups on there. No edge rolling that I can feel when I cut through there. No chips that I could feel. It just was a nice clean cut. The edges weren't even frayed. If I have to go through more than one roll with this, I will, because this is a knife that is worth testing to the end. Unlike that silly $5 razor knife that would just cut forever. So that must make the Phil Wilson knives quite impressive. Imagine having such a great edge geometry as his knives, and such a high alloy steel as an S90 or an S110. Speaking of S90, my Benchmade should be back from service tomorrow, according to UPS. So we'll see if that ends up kicking my valet out of the pocket. I didn't like the valet so much at first. I kind of felt like the edge got a little too steep too fast. But you know, after carrying it and using it, it's really growing on me. And I think it's a really thin blade stock. It's basically about 0.1 inches. But it gets kind of thick a little faster than like on one of these knives. And the knife itself has steel liners, full steel liners. They're milled out, but they're not the nested steel liners. And so it's actually a really tough little knife. And the lock bar, or the stop pin, whatever you call it, is pretty thick on it. So for a small knife, I would say it can actually probably take some heavy use. I took a walk and tried whittling a couple sticks, and it did really well. And it was really comfortable, especially considering how small it is, and it has no jimping on it. But I think that the valet is just a beautiful knife, and I know that the term gentleman's knife gets tossed around a lot. And I see a lot of people calling like things like this a gentleman's knife just because it has like a fancy scale on it. But to me, the definition of a gentleman's knife is one you can pull out in polite company and not get any negative attention from it, you know? Something that doesn't call attention to yourself. And to me, just because it has carbon fiber, if it's a 4-inch blade, it's not going to be a gentleman's knife, in my opinion. But I think the valet from Benchmade could possibly pass this one. If you open it one-handed and close it one-handed in polite company, then I think you could pass it off as a gentleman's knife. Because the G10 on there actually looks like almost like a wood grain. It kind of has the look of a linen micarta. You can see this thing is still cutting like a beast. This thing is a laser. It is definitely by far the sliciest knife I own. That's taking more pressure to cut through now though, so let's see where we're at on the paper test. It's getting a little rough. It's fraying the edges a little bit now, but still cuts pretty clean. You might notice on this test I'm able to cut the rope quite a bit faster with this knife than I have with the previous ones. And I think that has to do with the blade geometry and also with the shape of the handle. and where the blade falls relative to the handle. And so this thing is just, I think this thing is just meant to cut. And I'm cutting this fast even though I just did that long razor knife test that just took up the entire roll. So the fact that I'm cutting this fast on a second test, I think it speaks very highly of this knife. You know, the Spyderco discontinued this model, I think, last year or earlier this year. And so I've still seen them on some of the online websites, but you know, if you want a really good slicer and you like the axis lock, you may want to consider this. Because it's like having a Benchmade that cuts like a Spyderco. It's like it's a hybrid, you know. It's like a Toyota Prius. So I think this has some good features to it if you don't mind a wide pocket knife. So if you're able to carry the Mannix and that doesn't bother you, then I think you'd be okay with this too. You can see I'm trying to do a double cut now, go forward and then back, so the edge is starting to get some wear down on now. So it's starting to wear down a little. But it's, and when I say a little, I mean a little, not a lot, because you can see I can still go one cut through. But to do that, I'm having to push harder into the wood. Still in frame. The video will probably cut out soon. It always cuts out around 12 minutes, so just hang on there with me. I'll get it restarted. I won't let you miss any cutting action because this is so exciting. I'll actually have to pause the video while I walk to get the next roll of rope if this keeps going at the rate it is. You know, I really do. I think a lot of people expect to get s30v cutting out of s35 VN, but me personally, I consider s35 VN to be more like VG10. And I think just maybe a hair better on edge retention, but I think it should excel in toughness though over the VG10. Because even though the VG10 does take a fine edge, it is still an ingot still, and with that much alloy content in there, that much carbide, it's not going to have the finest grain, you know. I mean, even though it is very fine for what it is. I looked on Bowler's website, who makes M390 and LMAX. They have a knife website, and on there it says, it has some CATRA results. It says that their N690, which is basically the European equivalent of VG10, it did somewhere in the 500 cut realm, and then that the S35 did somewhere around the 600 cut realm. So only about 20% apart, whereas the S30v was closer to 30% apart. So I think if you're going into a knife with S35 VN and you're expecting it to cut as long as S30v, you might be disappointed. I think the main reason to go with S35 VN though over S30 is it's easier to sharpen. It supposedly has a finer grain. I've been able to get slightly sharper edges on my S35 than I have on my S30. Not night and day difference, but enough to be somewhat noticeable. Now let's try a cut test here. You can see how it's cutting all the way to the tip. If you remember with my Delicas and my ZT, the tip was dulling before everything else. It was having issues cutting early on. But I'm noticing the shape of this knife, it keeps the tip off the cutting board by about 1/8 of an inch. So that's why the tip is holding in there. It's not digging into the wood like the other ones were. Camera's still recording, probably not for long, it'll probably shut off soon. I think I'm to the last about 12 feet of rope here. So I'm cutting slower. That's just that's mostly me being tired, not the blade. Although the blade is getting a little more dull. Still recording? Yeah, still recording. You know, I'm glad I got this knife. Even though I don't carry it much, it's just such a good cutter that I'm glad to have it. I don't think I'll sell it since they're discontinued now. It'll probably be hard to find. I wouldn't be surprised if this ends up being a valuable Spyderco knife to have in the future. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if they go up in value, because I don't think they really sold very well ever. And so they may end up having some collector's value in the future, possibly. I think the majority of people, it seems like, from what I've seen, who have bought these are people who have bought the whole Sage collection and just wanted to have every iteration of the knife. Still cutting pretty clean. You can't really see it on the video, but it's fraying the edge of the paper a little bit now. Looks like I'm to like the last 8 or 10 feet of the roll here. You can see I can still pull cut through it, you know. I'm still able to do it in one slice when I give a go at it. But my arm is getting tired. It does take more force to get through right now. But it's still cutting like a champion. It still has a very good edge. I really do think this is probably easily the sliciest of the Sage series. I mean, if it has the same blade stock, but the blade is like 1/8 of an inch taller, the edge must be quite a bit, it must be noticeably steeper. So, yeah, if you look carefully on the pictures of the Sages, you'll notice the thumb ramp, I think, is slightly different on this one too, compared to the other Sages. I think the way the bolt lock is designed, it requires a slightly different blade shape around the tang area. You can see it's still cutting really easily, you know. If my arm weren't so tired, I'm doing like 800 cuts here total between this and the razor, it would be even easier still. You can see it's just going right through still. I get the feeling this can outperform some higher class steels on the knives that you try, depending on the edge geometry they have. Like with this edge geometry, I wouldn't be surprised if it could approach maybe M390 if the knife doesn't have optimal geometry. But speaking of M390, I was first introduced to M390 by my friend. Well, I introduced it to him online and he bought it, and I had the Benchmade in S90, and his knife, mine would hold a working edge longer, but his would actually retain that razor's edge long after my 940-1 lost its razor edge. And so that really impressed me a lot, and that's part of the reason I bought the Valet, because I wanted to get that M390. Plus the M390 is so corrosion resistant, and when you get the knife, even though the Benchmade puts a satin finish on it, it's like it almost has like a mirror finish underneath the satin finish. It's just such a reflective steel. It's just nice. I don't see it having any rust issues really. Whereas my Kershaw League with the Sandvik 14C M28, I think that's the number. That, when I took it apart to replace the torsion bar, it had rust on the tank in between the two slabs of stainless steel. And so I don't know if they really improved the corrosion resistance that much over the Sandvik 13 that the Sandvik 14 was based on. Alright, let's try a cut test here. I'm at the end of that rope. Alright, still cutting. Alright, let me get another piece of rope. Hold on. Okay, here we are with another piece of rope. What a mess. Alright, here we go. Proceeding on with the knife. Just do a progress report again on the cut. Still cutting pretty clean. All the way to the tip, still cutting nice. Sorry guys, that's just me. The blister I got from doing the Delica test is starting to annoy me here. Let me try a nice pull cut here. And you can see it's still cutting. So it's partially the blade doling up, but it's partially me. I guess I can work through the annoyance of this blister if I really push on. Yeah, like always, I said I don't keep track of these counts. I make the video. Once it doesn't cut anymore, I go back and review the video and then tabulate the counts and then come back with the total. So that way I don't have any psychology built into these tests where I'm rooting for the steel to keep going. So since I don't know what the number is, it's a blind test in that regard. It feels like it's getting a little more difficult to cut through. Let me try a pull test again here. And it still goes through pretty clean actually. So it might just be me getting tired. You know, with the shape of this blade, it does better it's more efficient pulling through than it is sawing, you know. So the shape of this blade, it just excels when you pull through the material like this. On the Delicas, it was doing better by doing forward-backwards cutting action. It's starting to get dull, I can feel it, you know. But that still slices. I think by anyone's opinion, that still slices. And again, with these tests, if you think it meets a certain level of dullness that you consider to be the end of the test, you can call the test whenever you want. So, and this sharpening technique, it's a V grind, and it's just me sharpening freehand, except for when I use the sharp maker for maybe a total of I don't know, maybe 40 passes between the brown and the white stones, just to refine the edge, get rid of the burr, and then progress to the strop. But as I said in the previous video, the strop is kind of new to me. I just made it out of a piece of oak, I don't know, maybe a month ago now. So I lived without that for the first 12 years of my folding knife ownership. It wasn't until maybe about 5 years ago, 6 years ago, when I first got Spyderco that I upgraded to the Spyderco Ceramics, and from day one I was impressed with what that Spyderco fine white ceramic can do. When I got that, I was able to get my knife so much sharper. My skill wasn't very good at sharpening at the time though. And I think most people would say that's still slicing reliably. I'm getting sore cutting on the knife though. There's no new hot spots, it's just, this one is just aggravating the wound from the delicate cut tests. I know you can't see me cutting the rope as well when I do this, but it's easier for me to cut this way. I'll keep the board clean so you can tell that I'm actually cutting for sure. Yeah, it goes through pretty decently still. It's definitely doling up though. It's taking more pressure to get through. And I'm only really using the front portion of the blade, the front maybe a total of an inch and a half at the very most, but really the front inch is getting majority of the cutting, with the exception of the 1/8 of an inch on the tip, which is hovering above the board. So obviously if you're able to use the whole blade, you would obviously go longer on a cut test. But the way the cutting boards are and the way the ropes are, I mean, it's only really easy to use the front half of the blade, or even just the front third. Progress report. Alright, getting a little jagged there. Oh, let's see, maybe it's not reliable? No, I don't know. What do you guys call that? I think that's still reliable. I swear the blade, when it's warm, it's still, oh, that's hot. Wow. I swear the edge expands a little. And then you wait for 2 seconds, 3 seconds, and then it cools and contracts and gets a little sharper again. Could just all be in my head though, you never know. But let me know what you think about that. When your edge gets warm, let me know what you think, if it actually cools down and then cuts a little bit better. Oh, and also on that topic, all the knives I've done the test with so far, I have not retouched the blades in any way. So they're still in the same shape they were in when the test ended, for each one of them. And so if you think one of them could have gone a little farther, I can come back on and continue cutting with it. I mean, if there's enough of a consensus that I stopped too early on one of them. But if I went too far on one of them, you can't do anything to go back. All you can do is see where you think it stopped at, and then count down how many cuts go on till the end, and then subtract that from the total. You know, and then you can find out what it is in your mind. So I think that's the one advantage of me cutting this way in real time, is that you can call the end of the test based on the paper cuts and how they sound. And the negative about this test though is it takes forever because it's real time, and so you're seeing 20 to 30 minute tests here. That's why I really like Cedric and Ada's videos. It's really cool how he speeds up the video to go through the cut test and then gives you the results at the end. I think that's really cool. He's got some skills on video editing, I think. I have no skills on video editing at all. I can do photo editing on Lightroom because I shoot in Camera Raw for my hobby is doing photography, but never done videography before. This is my first time recording videos and posting them online. I don't usually like to post things online with my picture or my voice. I like to stay off the web in that way. But after seeing all these reports on poor performance of ZT and the heat treat, owning a ZT, I just had to see for myself how it did. And I figured if I'm going to do the cut test and report it on blade forums, I might as well record it. There's kind of a mantra about being online, no picture, no proof, you know. If there's no picture, no proof, it didn't happen, you know. I've heard that, I've seen that written thousands of times online. Sometimes people go on and make some claims that don't seem to jive up with the known results of certain metals. And when they offer nothing to back that up, it's hard to take it seriously. So that's not to say it didn't happen though, just because they don't have proof of it. I mean, there are plenty of times where I've used my knife, like I said, with a 15-degree angle on one side, so 30 inclusive, where my knife rolled on good quality steels. I didn't make videos of it, but it doesn't mean it didn't happen. But as the consumer of media, it's up to you guys to make the decision whether it's legitimate or a trustworthy source. Much like you would make the decision on whether a certain news channel is reputable and to be trusted. Just like with these cut tests, if a news channel makes a false claim once, you can maybe forgive it. Maybe they made a mistake. If they make a false claim more than a few times in a short period of time, then you can start to think that maybe they're not so trustworthy anymore. So I think the same goes with the blade tests. And I think the more open your methods are, the less they can be called into question. You can debate the usefulness of the test, but the results are right in front of your eyes, and you can judge for yourself where the test is going and if it's accurate. Well, it's not no longer push cutting. Probably gave that up a while ago. So, I don't know, should I call it now? I think I should. Let me see. That still cuts pretty clean. If I'm going at a steep angle, no, it's good actually. Let me start from the middle where I'm cutting. It's hard to say. I could call it right now, I suppose. Let me see. This is the area that's getting the most use, I think. And yeah, see, it's not... Well, that edge was actually curled for me trying to cut into it like an axe. Let me get a fresh piece with actually good corners. No, that's still cutting. On that paper, when you saw me not getting in, the edges were rounded from me doing this on it. So, but I think we're close to the end here. I was just looking at the roll, I'm like, hey, not bad, half of a roll only. But I forgot I used an entire roll before this one. See, look at this, I'll do a draw cut again. Here, let's see, a little tear, watch. See, it still goes through. I'm putting pressure on there, but not a tremendous amount. Not enough to shake the table. Alright, let's try another cut test. Progress report. Okay, I think we're to the end. I think it still cuts a little, but I don't know. I hate calling these sometimes. I want to keep consistent, but these cut tests, as one Blade Members Forum member posted, are very subjective. But you can see I'm using the portion of the blade in which I was cutting, with which I was cutting. So you can see when the paper is folded over a little there, it wasn't going in. This is a straight edge here though. Okay, so see, at a shallower angle it's going in, but at a steeper angle it's having a little bit of problem. But see, it's still cutting though. Okay, I think it's chipping it. I think it's slipping enough to call it. Obviously, it's still usable, but see how it rips the paper every few cuts? I'm going to call that the end. If you guys disagree, I'll leave the edge how it is, and I can always come back to this. So I'm going to go tabulate the count, and I will be back with the total. Okay, YouTube Blade Forums, I'm back here. So I did the counting on the cut tests, and I came up with 1,050 cuts. That is quite incredible. I mean, that is just leaps and bounds above everything else I've tested so far. It more than doubled the ZT 450 with the S30v VN. These results are kind of small. I hope you can see them. So VG10 with the full flat, with the hollow grind was 300 cuts. With the full flat grind, it was 360. ZT with the S30v VN was 438. And now the Sage 3 with S30v is at 1,050 cuts. This thing is just a sliceaholic. It just keeps going, and it had excellent ergonomics. The cuts went through the rope easier than any other knife that I've used so far, and it's definitely dull now. But you can see it still cuts. Like, it's still definitely usable. So yeah, this is where the edge got the most use right there, and you can still see it's cutting in, but it's really rough. It's really fraying the edges. There's quite a bit of resistance. So I mean, maybe you think it could have gone a little bit further. I mean, I don't think it could have gone farther than maybe 50 more cuts at the most, but I think that's a good end there because it's not reliably getting into that paper anymore. So Sage 3 with S30v more than doubling the result of the S30v VN. So I think there's 2 points to go with that though. The S30v VN that I cut with was a ZT, and that had a really thick grind. The blade got steep really fast. This thing is so thin, and it doesn't start getting thick until right around here where the Spyderco hole is. So it's an incredible design. No blade play whatsoever, up, down, left or right. And all in all, it's just a good knife. It works just like an axis lock, as you can see in the video here. So, except the omega springs don't break, because there's no omega spring in here. And the main difference on this and the axis lock, where the axis lock has a bar that goes forward and back like this one has a bolt that wedges in between the top of the tang on here and a lock bar on the top, stop pin right up here. So it just goes back and forth like that. When you retract it, it comes back. So that's the design of the Sage. Beautiful cutter, beautiful ergonomics, just amazing. But as you can see, a little big in the hand. I wear medium-sized gloves, and you can see that it's quite large in the hand when the blade's closed. So that's my only complaint about this blade. Besides that, I think it's just an amazing knife. I like it a lot. I'm glad I bought it, and I would recommend it to anyone who's looking for a quality knife, especially one that can cut like this. So thanks so much for viewing, you guys. Let me know what you guys think. Thank you very much, guys. Bye.